Late night free agency news, and you gotta love it. The Detroit Lions are set to re-sign Dan Skipper on a one-year deal, so let's get right into it. So yes, we have some Detroit Lions news, and to me, this was a necessary move for the Detroit Lions, and that is re-signing good old Dan Skipper back to a one-year deal. Now, we don't know the details on this contract, and it's very possible that the reason that this deal came through a little bit later is that he was testing the market. He wanted to see what teams were willing to offer him. Maybe he was going to get a better opportunity elsewhere this season. And if that was the case, I'm not saying it was, but if it was the case, I would completely understand that from Dan Skipper's perspective. He's now over 30 years old, but this past season, he essentially had 3 games, which he was our starting left tackle. And I didn't walk away from those games saying this is the replacement for Taylor Decker. Well, actually, after the Bears game, I was like, well, hold up, maybe he could start because it was that impressive. Walked away feeling very comfortable about him as your backup offensive tackle. And the growth from Dan Skipper, the strides that he has made have been fantastic in the NFL. Playing multiple positions, looking out of place to all of a sudden, it looks pretty natural for Dan Skipper. And I think this is obviously a grinder. That's been our jumbo package offensive lineman as well. That's even seen some improvements. He played 68 snaps as our jumbo package offensive lineman this past year. There's clear limitations within his game, but don't tell him that. At 6'9", 320 pounds, this guy's played at guard. And it looked horrible early, but then it got better. But this past season for me really just made it we got to bring Dan Skipper back. Like, there's no doubt we have to bring this player back. And I know we hear good things about Giovanni Manu, and Brad Holmes tells us that during the season he took these massive strides through practice. But from the outside looking in, from a fan perspective, I don't know what that looks like for Giovanni Manu. And I hope that he is the future swing tackle, or who knows, maybe even the future starting tackle for the Lions. That'd be fantastic. He had a long way to go, of course, just from competition alone. But in the meantime, the guy that we have gotten to see take those strides is Dan Skipper, and he's taken massive strides. This past season, he started against the Houston Texans for the first time, and I'm not going to say that was a great performance. They were also missing their top pass rusher, Will Anderson, in the game, but they did have Danielle Hunter. I didn't walk away from that game thinking Dan Skipper was horrible. I thought it was okay as a pass protector. The run blocking looked like it had the most issues, and I felt like that's where we missed him the most. But as we grew to learn, that was a fast, flying around defensive front that was fantastic on the season, even without Will Anderson. But it was then the next 2 games. It was Green Bay. It was Chicago. And walking out of those 2 games and feeling very comfortable knowing that Dan Skipper was your starting offensive tackle. Like, if we have to go to Dan Skipper, I'm actually pretty comfortable with it. And backup tackle has been all over the place since Brad Holmes has gotten here and trying to figure out how that's gone. It started with Matt Nelson, where they're going to draft somebody. Then they go the undrafted free agent route. That doesn't work out. And now they stick with Dan Skipper. And ultimately, he just keeps finding a way to bounce around, continue to grow, continue to learn. And he's gotten to a point where you can trust him. You're going to have to give him some help. You're going to send some support his direction with a tight end, a chip to kind of slow down the rush, to center it up a little bit better for him. It's very serviceable, especially as a pass protector. I think there's real limitations in both pass protection and run blocking. I think it shows up a little bit more as a run blocker due to some of the reactive athleticism, and also just the natural pad level that he plays with can be a little bit of a problem as well to really sink, create consistent leverage as a run blocker. But as a pass protector, especially when he gets some help, we see that this guy seemingly is tapping into what he's truly capable of, and we saw it this past season. For me, Dan Skipper, who allowed 12 pressures on the year, that's a 95% efficiency rate, which is a 1% jump from 2 seasons ago when he played a majority of the snaps as well. The year before, in 2023, really is only kind of a spot player, played a little bit of left guard, played 240 snaps at left tackle for us. And just going and looking at some of the notes that I had for him, there's a lot of things that I think have grown. First off, from a football intelligence perspective, I think he plays with really good control as a pass protector specifically. He stays within himself. It allows him to maximize his capabilities. It's why giving him support is helpful, because reactively, if you put him on an island, there could be some real problems against speed rushers and his ability to react and move without a slide protection. However, when you give him some support, that ability to play very controlled, and we saw it. This is a perfect example against Green Bay when they bring the inside blitz. His ability to be patient, stay within himself, within his base, redirect back inside, and pick up the inside blitzer. Like, that's a smart player that makes you say, okay, we can rely on this piece. He's going to protect our quarterback. He sees it. We all know he has the nastiness to his game. We've all seen that come out from Dan Skipper. There's no question about that, and that he's going to fight for you. You love Dan Skipper for all those little things. Him lining at receiver, running routes. He's legitimately trying to get open. I thought that was the most amazing thing ever. He didn't really have a route. He just kind of ran a quick. He just stood there and put his arms back to the quarterback, like, throw it over here. But ultimately, as Jared Goff, kind of the play broke down, he started to try to get open. I thought that was fantastic against Dallas. That's the kind of player that Dan Skipper is. He's the kind of guy that's like, yo, don't hit my quarterback. He's got that old school mentality for an offensive lineman that you love. And he's earned coming back for the Detroit Lions because of that. But it's the growth as an offensive tackle that has allowed it to be like, yeah, bringing him back actually makes a lot of sense. It's not just that he's this fiery guy for our team. He's actually a really reliable backup offensive tackle at this point, specifically as a pass protector. He plays with tight hands on entry. He's got a lot of latch strengths, which allows him to win early. We saw against Green Bay, I think specifically, a lot of the quick passing game, but his ability to get hands on guys early, set up screens, kind of just latch guys out for the rep and shut it down. And he played with the control that allowed him to really absorb contact, not continue to get bullied back into the pocket. He showed a lot more control. The base stayed under him. And then on contact, he could really absorb it, move, really kind of sustain a nice little anchor through some of his pass protection reps. So you throw those two things together and you like that. Now, again, some limitations. The reactive athleticism is not fantastic. As a run blocker, there's times where he's trying to hinge block or trying to seal down an edge, and all of a sudden a guy slips past him because he doesn't have some of that quickness. Or if he tries to sustain as a rep kind of goes along and really mirror with a defender, that can cause holding issues because he's a little bit upright. But it can also cause issues because if he doesn't let go in time, he doesn't have maybe the movement skills to actually stay in front of said defender agility wise. But in terms of positioning up to the second level, that's the spot that he's been effective. He's played with good angles. He's played with a wide frame when he gets out to the second level. Dan Skipper being brought back was a must. It was an absolute must for the Lions. And I don't know what the details are. We'll see. But this makes me feel a lot more calm about our offensive line. I always want to make sure that we have a backup tackle that we can rely on. And as crazy as it may sound, Dan Skipper has become that guy for the Lions. Being said, the plan is tomorrow to do a live stream, hopefully a little bit earlier in the day before the Lions make any more moves, any big significant moves. We're planning to do a live stream. We'll see. I think Speakeasy might be jumping on with us as well and talking about some of the more options the Lions have that are available. I've been looking through some tonight for tomorrow. And I'll just say this to kind of keep it in mind. Kevin Zeitler's still the free agent. He's still like top of my list. If we can walk away with Kevin Zeitler, I would be a happy man. And then after that, it's like, all right, whatever happens, happens. Just bring back Kevin Zeitler. So that's still top of the list. Levi Onwuzurike is still available. And with the price points that have been giving out to defensive tackles, I'm very concerned that he is going to make a ton of money. Not concerned because like, oh no, he doesn't deserve money. Concerned for the Lions' sake of trying to get him back, that it could easily be $20 million a season. I think that's very, very much so on the table, especially after Milton Williams signing for $26 million. Like, I think that's absolutely on the table. That defensive tackle group thinned out fast of young players that are productive. Even Javon Kinlaw got a lot of money. So I'm concerned that that may not be possible, but I'm still holding out hope. I'd love to have Levi back. Priority is bringing a lot of these guys just back to the Lions. And then, of course, we still have Ife Melifonwu, and safeties have been getting paid to this point. Ife's just in such a weird spot because there's such a limited sample size of actually being on the field. I still don't really know what teams are going to value Ife Melifonwu in terms of how much they're going to be willing to pay him. I would assume teams look around the league and say that's a good player, but you have to have the right fit, and fit matters a lot, especially for safety. It matters for every position, but specifically for safety, fit matters a ton in what you visualize the role. And then there's obviously a two-way street. Does he want to come back to the Lions if he doesn't see a obvious path to actually being a starter with Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph here? Does he want to just kind of be a role piece? Does he feel like he can actually take over that role? There's a two-way street there that neither side made love for the Lions and Ife Melifonwu. But I'm still keeping my eye on it because I just want to see what kind of the market truly is for a guy like that, how much they're willing to pay him. Because safety is going to be a spot that, as much as these guys are getting paid for depth purposes, because the Lions do have their two starters, I don't think they're going to have too much of a problem finding guys that they like. For example, Juan Thornhill was a guy that I recently watched tonight. I think that'd be a really cool option to add him to the secondary as well from Cleveland, 29 years old. I've given some other options, but he'd be a nice addition, I think, specifically for what we do, the single high coverage, kind of the burst, some of the range that he showcases, that ability to step down, play in the box comfortably. He kind of has a single high feel to him that could be interesting for the Lions. So ultimately, those are the three guys that I think we're all kind of keeping our eye on and what happens there. And then there's going to be a lot of linebackers that I think are going to be really interesting starting tomorrow, where they're not the big names on the market, but there are a lot of players that have been productive. Maybe there's a standout trait about their game. You think of a Landon Roberts and his ability to play the run. You think of a guy like Devin Bush and the upside that we had talked about there, a player like that. Tyrell Dodson, and he's kind of an all-around player, a little bit undersized, but you see some of the coverage ability that he brings, some of the discipline that he plays with. Players like that is another spot that I'm circling. And then, of course, we get to the edge rusher position. And while, again, that's been picked apart, there are still players where that's going to take a swing on upside. Maybe they haven't showed necessarily the three-down ability of like they're both great against the run and the pass. Maybe it's just a young player that hasn't gotten a lot of snaps. And that goes for the interior as well. I think both of those spots, while they're not in a great spot right now in terms of the top of the market, both those guys have their players at those two positions that are interesting, like a Golston from Dallas that showed some things last year, showed the length, just maybe hasn't put it all together yet as pass rusher, though he had his most productive season. And then finally, Kyle Juszczyk. I'm definitely going to talk about him tomorrow because he was released tonight. And as a Lions fan, the idea of putting Kyle Juszczyk on this team would be amazing. I don't know what his price point is actually going to be, but one, I think fullback is coming back for the Lions. And two, I think tight end number 3 is a need. Now, it's not a top priority, but I think it's a need. He played about 40% of his snaps at tight end this past year. Kyle Juszczyk, taking him from San Fran and putting him on this team, and the creativity we could use, not only as a pure fullback, but also as a third tight end. It's very capable with the ball in his hands. I'm just going to say I'm interested, but I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We'll keep an eye on all the moves that happen. Stay tuned for more news. And until then, thank you for watching, and I'm out.